you guys haven't been checking out the stuff at Run Pure. Him, JBC, a bunch of guys have been crushing baseball. DC, baseball's been amazing over at Run Pure. But today we got some NASCAR. Like I said, hopping on for Rubio today. We're at Pocono today. What do we got? How are we doing today, Stats?
Doing all right, man. Obviously a rough day yesterday in American history, but trying to get back to some normalcy hopefully today, and get some NASCAR going, man. I love Sundays. Well, my Sunday mornings kind of suck because it's extremely hectic getting the NASCAR, doing the show, getting the baseball going. But come 2:00 on, man, it's the great, at least this time of year. It's the greatest because then I can relax, watch a little cars go around in circles, which they're back to going around in circles this week, which we weren't doing last week. And hopefully, speaking of normalcy, I mean, hopefully we can get some normalcy back in NASCAR. I mean, it's been an absolute shit show the last couple of weeks with these races. We didn't, there was a possibility of some weather last week when we were doing the show, and then all of a sudden the weather became the number one thing. It became, if you were on certain tires, you were going to finish in the top last week, and if you weren't, you didn't. And I mean, that just threw everything out of whack as far as what we were looking for. I know we had a couple of people pop on the chat last week who were new to NASCAR, and they're like, oh, we've been looking at a bunch of different, the one guy was like, I've been watching a bunch of different shows. I can't win. Hopefully you guys can help me out. And yeah, I don't know if anyone was going to help anyone out last week with the mess that it was, but I do think this week we're looking at a little bit more of a chalk week. We've got a track that we've been to a bunch of times before, so we've got a little track history that we can go off of. The weather appears to be pretty good, and this is a track that in the past has been very much a chalk type of track where the fastest cars, best drivers do tend to get up to the front.
Yeah, you bring up a lot of good points. And last week was just from someone that it was entertaining to watch, but it was also super tilting. Last week was Chicago, right?
That was Chicago, yeah.
Where and the two like best plays of the slate, SVG and who was the other dude that crashed? The two like mega chalk that crashed.
Was now I'm forgetting, was it Dinger? Because I wound up I left after
that might have been Dinger. I can't remember. Like basically the two best plays of the slate though go down at the end and shift everything up and crazy. I like watching those weeks better just because it's entertaining driving through there.
Well,
but, I mean, I hate it for DFS. Like,
it's fun. Yeah, it's fun to watch. That's why everyone likes Daytona and everyone likes Talladega as a fan.
I love Daytona.
Yeah, because it's fun. It's interesting to watch. But as a DFS player, it's like, man,
you just hope to get lucky.
Yeah, you just throw darts. I mean, it's a lottery ticket.
I faded SVG last week too, and it wasn't because I didn't think he was a great play. I just knew he was going to be like literally 70% owned and stuff. And I was just like, if he crashes. So I actually was on the good end last week of the crashes because I didn't play him. And I was losing all day, just like you were probably winning most of the day. Yeah. And then it totally flipped once he crashes and finishes towards the bottom, and everyone's dead that had him.
That happened with, I think it was a couple of weeks ago with Larson when he made it 2 or 3 weeks ago when he had the that late I faded him. And yeah, you look like an idiot. And it really wasn't, it didn't exactly work out for the reasons I was fading him, but it works out. I mean,
doesn't matter how it works out. Once it happens, is the good.
Exactly. That's NASCAR. It's crazy. But I think we're going to, I think I've said this a couple of times. It hasn't worked out, but I think we're going to be a little bit more chalky. We're going to see the better drivers. You're always going to have to sneak in someone down at the bottom, someone low owned always finds their way into the winning lineup. We'll see if we can pick that one out. We do a thing. I don't know if you realize, Big T, so be prepared at the end. Yeah. Rubio and I, we try to pick someone sub 20% ownership on Sabre as who we think will make it into the nuts lineup. So keep that in the back of your mind when we're going through it.
I love it. And you bring up a good point today where I think this is a lot more normal of a race. I always like to ask too, and you know these things, but how many DOMs on a day like this? Because I looked at the last 5 years. I think it's 2 from the top 10. Almost every race have been in the optimal. So I'm planning on going 1 to 2 today because I still think there could be a little bit, but I think 2 is the number today. What do you think for a number of DOMs before?
Yeah, you're probably right. I mean, I think people do get a little confused on the DOMs. You've got to look at, when I look at DOMs, I'm looking at, do they have to dominate to win the race? Like there's always going to be some guys in a lot of these races who don't necessarily, they are DOM potential, but they don't necessarily need to DOM. So you want to kind of leave those guys out when you're picking Doms, if you're doing 1 or 2, I would do 1 to 2 in 150 build. I think that's probably going to be about right. But if you've got someone, and we don't have a ton of that this week with guys starting too far back who are the top drivers, because again, this track it's all about speed and the equipment, and these guys tend to qualify, in the right. You don't get guys qualifying in the back typically at this track who are going to be dominators or potential dominators. Plus, we don't have that many laps here. We got 160 laps, so the Dom points are not as crucial. But what you're seeing when you looked in the past and you're looking at some nut lineups from the past, it's those guys also finished really high. So that's going to be key. You've got the Dom points, and they're going to have to finish high. The points are going to be very much bunched up because no one's going to go out there and score 115 points. Like, we're not going to get that this week. So everyone's going to kind of be, they should be, at least. I mean, typically we're going to be, 50 to 80 points is going to be that sweet spot. And every one of these, fastest laps becomes more important. Like, every incremental place differential becomes all that much more important when we're so tight on the scoring. And this is, for those who don't know, this is the longest track outside of the road courses that they race on. That's not a restrictor plate. We talked about Talladega and Daytona. So it's a long track, huge straightaway, which is why the speeds get up to where they do. And it's not, it's basically the best drivers with the best cars. So, and not as much, I don't think the pole will mean as much as it does in some of these tracks. Some of these tracks that we've seen, these intermediate tracks, short tracks, where these guys get out to the front on the pole and they lead a bunch of laps. That's not necessarily going to be the case here. So we got Ty Gibbs on the pole, but if he's not the best car, he will get past rather quickly. And you can't really block here because the track is so big. So those are some things to keep in mind. I think and we'll get to the individual drivers, but I think maybe the ownership on Sabre a little high on Gibbs. Maybe people are looking at these races, these recent races where the pole is a little bit more important. I don't think it's as important this week.
Man, I'd be absolutely, because this is the first time I'm looking at these ownerships. I would be absolutely stunned if Ty Gibbs gets to 50%. There's no way with these guys up top too, and you got Hamlin and Truex have been awesome in this spot. I don't see how. I mean, they're not coming. Truex isn't coming in 27%. There's no way. I mean, I don't think he's got to be higher, right? These guys are.
I think so. Yeah, I think I don't think they're far off here on Truex. I think the one that I noticed when I was running my builds this morning and kind of prepping for this was Gibbs was really the one that was, I think, a bit out of whack.
Crazy.
This is not going to happen. Yeah. We kind of go through. We'll go through them, but Hamlin. Someone just mentioned in the chat, Hamlin dominates, and he has dominated here in the past. But if you recall last year, he did not have the best car last year. Larson had the best car, and Hendrick was Hendrick in general had the best cars here, and Hamlin basically wrecked him to win that race. So I think
for the donkeys like me, that's Larson, that's Byron, that's
Hendricks, Larson, Byron, Elliott. Those are the guys that we're looking at. Bowman. Yeah. They had the fastest cars. Like I said, Hendrick had now when you look at the betting markets this week, JGR with Denny Hamlin, that's Hamlin, Bell,
all the Toyotas,
Truex, the Toyotas, Gibbs. They are the favorite, and they're a pretty decent favorite they're like an even money favorite to win this race.
Is Keselowski one of those two?
Keselowski's in a Ford. He's in RFK.
I got you.
So we're seeing, basically the Toyotas are the favorite, and JGR kind of leading the way with Denny Hamlin, the favorite in the race. But I'd be a little cautious here. If I'm choosing between the two highest price guys, it's the same guys every week. It's always Hamlin and Larson. I'd be cautious here because, again, remember what I said earlier. I think every potential incremental increase in points is going to be huge. That differential between 12th and 4th place starting position, I think, is going to be dramatic. I think Larson will have a fast car. The other thing, while I talk about fast cars, is take a look at the practice times. Some tracks really doesn't matter. Some drivers, it really doesn't matter. Denny Hamlin never matters what his practice times are. But for the most part, take a look at practice times with these guys. That is going to be a big factor. I know you like Truex. Truex was the fastest car out there. Byron was really fast this week. So pay attention to those guys. I mean, Larson had a pretty fast car. Larson's always going to be in the mix. I just think that 12th to 4th, that 8th place, that 8 places in place differential difference could be a huge factor here. And Larson certainly has the ability to get us a bunch of Dom points. So that's why I know a lot of people projecting, and it looks like Sabre has it as well. Their ownerships are going to be close. I do think Larson gets the bump in ownership because of that this week.
Yeah, and people always just tend to gravitate towards Larson anyways. If I had to take a guess, I mean, he's got to be the highest owned guy like on the year. Just feels like every week he's in the best spot. It feels like he always starts like in this range too. Like you said, 12th and 4th is a big difference. I just, for whatever reason, don't feel Larson in this spot. And you always got to take stands. At least I do. I know you play more of a balanced approach, but I like to, say for these top 4, I like to pick 2 of them and kind of go heavier. And I'm not saying to full fade the other guys. Of course, if you're playing 20, 150, you want to get some in there on them. But me personally, especially my main team and stuff, I like to pick 1, 2. It's just hard for me not to pick Truex Hamlin. I just think Truex has by far the best car in my mind. And I do like the slight place differential there, though. And so I was going to ask you, do you like to maybe take one of these guys and one of Larson Bell? So maybe Hamlin, Truex, or does that not even weigh on you at all?
I mean, in the 150 builds, it depends on the track. Sometimes there's going to be some sort of a rule put in there depending on the track. Today, not so much. I'm not all that worried about it because I think we could get 2 or 3. Getting 3 of these guys is going to be difficult, but you're also not going to be able to fit.
Would you play 3
of these
if
guys
you could, even though there's not as much maybe upside?
I don't think. I mean, I certainly wouldn't do it in a single line. I just don't think. And it's more about you're always thinking about the bottom half, like who do I fit in if I do that with it? And I just don't think you're going to have a situation where a lot of these guys on the bottom. I'm not expecting a lot of wrecks, so that's typically how a lot of these crappier cars are going to make their way up to the top. We did have Burton last year finish with a really high finish and get into the nuts lineup, but I think you'll wind up having one of those guys. And I think where you're going to put yourself, if you play 3 of these 4, is you're probably going to have to put 2 or more of these really crappy drivers into your lineup. And I just don't think that's going to get you there. So I think I think you could have 2 max of these guys, and then you're probably going to be looking at some mid. We've got, the pricing is tight this week I don't know how close you looked at it yet, but the pricing's pretty tight. Maybe Bubba Wallace is the only, he's probably going to be the highest owned guy. He's the only one who's maybe underpriced a bit, but I think they priced the overall field pretty well. So I think it's going to be difficult to necessarily get. I think we're going to have a more spread out type of lineup that wins it. So I wouldn't necessarily force in 3 guys in my builds.
Yeah, like you said with Bubba, I mean, usually every week we have a bunch of place differentials, at least 2 or 3 that stick off the page. Today it's kind of like just Bubba, which I mean he's got to be crazy chalk. But at the top, I mean, when I was running Sabre before the show just to kind of get ready for it too, I kept getting 3. So I actually set a rule to only, like you said, max 2 of these guys because Sabre just kept wanting to give me 3. Every time, 3 of these top guys. So I don't know if it's that Sabre thinks there's a lot of value towards the bottom of it or what, but I think 3 is too many, just in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it is too.
All the same reasons you said. I mean,
yeah.
you broke it down perfectly with that. But just for the 10K range, how do you rank these guys? 1 to 5.
Yeah, I mean, I would put Larson up top, and I think Hamlin's next.
Clearly 1, 2 for you, or is it pretty close?
It's not clear because I think you mentioned Truex as well, and he's moved up in the betting market. So I think it's typically I can move Byron in over Hamlin. I still like Larson here starting 12th as my number 1 pick of this group. And I think Truex and Hamlin are a lot closer. With Truex, again, looking like he had the best car in practice, he could easily get a lot of these down points with a high finish position and make his way into I know you like him, and I think it's with good reason. I think Bell is the most interesting one here. He gets that 13th. So of these guys, right, starts the furthest from the back. He has had maybe the best car over the last month and change, right? He's been the fastest car, but he has not typically done well at these type of tracks. So I think for that reason, he is going to be a bit under, and he was slow in practice as well. So I think he'll be a little bit low ownership. So I think I was looking in the chat here, and some people talking about Bell. I don't think it's a terrible play to get contrarian and or to get some leverage, I should say, on the field, and throwing Bell in there and kind of eliminating one of the more chalkier plays of the Hamlin, Larson, Truex. If you use a Bell instead of those, I think you pick up a little leverage on the field and just go on the fact that he's been so good, over the last month and a half or so. So I think his ownership gets you to a point where he's a very intriguing play.
Yeah, and you have to weigh that because, I mean, you look at the odds market, he's a little lower too. He's just got to come in. I mean, when you got all these guys between 4 and 7 or 8 to 1 up top, and he's 14 to 1, at least on DraftKings I'm looking at. I mean, he's just going to come in lower, which obviously 17% on here compared to these other guys are all going to be. Byron's not going to be in the 30s, but the other three at least be in the 30s, if not higher. I mean, I won't be surprised if one of these guys pops into the 40s or something up top. Because like we said, with Ty Gibbs and stuff being lower, I think that'll happen. For me, I kind of want to play Truex with Hamlin. I know I kind of talked about this in the beginning. Or if I went the other route, Larson with Byron type thing. Byron's going to be my guy that I'm going to – if I want to take a stab, I'm going to go with him. I'm going to fade Bell. I know he's been good. I just don't love his history. I don't love his speed. And like I said, I always want to fade at least one of these guys. I don't like to play them all. Just a personal preference. I like to do that in MMA a little bit too, where I take a stand and just fade someone just to clear some of that out of there. But I like Truex like by far the most today. He's my biggest stand. But let's slide down to the 9Ks. We got Reddick starting 7th, 9,800. Chase 11th, 95. Blaney 93. Ty Gibbs 9K starting first. This is the range I don't like much at all. I like the studs. I like to go down. Sabre was pushing it earlier. So this range, as you're looking over here, all guys somewhat low owned besides the Gibbs, obviously starting 1 where we talked about. But I don't like anyone in this range. What's your opinion in here?
Well, I mean, I think Reddick is interesting because Reddick has been really good at intermediate tracks. So, I think he gets some ownership because of that. I've got interest in Tyler Reddick. I mean, you look at him just at this track alone, 2nd last year, 4th the year before, both in the next gen cars. Nashville, he had a 3rd place finish. Charlotte, 4th place. So I think this is where Reddick tends to do well. So I think it's kind of be careful with a fade of Reddick here. I think he's super interesting. Chase Elliott he's been like pretty good all year, like not really, not dominating Chase Elliott, but he's been a pretty safe driver. Starts 11th. I just think he's a little bit overpriced for my liking, 9,500 for I think what his potential, could be here from Elliott. I think Blaney is going to be low owned. I think that's an easy one to kind of get off of. I don't like Blaney starting 8th. I think he's probably the easiest fade of this group. Gibbs, we kind of touched on it. I think the ownership with Sabre is a bit exaggerated. I just don't think he's going to be that high on the ownership. I think we're looking at somewhere in the 20s makes a little bit more sense for Gibbs. Let's look at his practice times quickly. And he was, so Gibbs in practice, not bad. He was, right around 10th place in practice as far as his 5-lap average. So not terrible. I don't think he's as fast though as some of these guys who are starting up closer, like a Truex. And again, starting first on the pole here doesn't necessarily have the advantage that it does on some of these other tracks, where if you can win the restart and then get yourself out front, you can block and you're in the clean air and you're basically going to be running a ton of laps in front. If he doesn't have the best car, he will get eaten up early. And I think that's what I expect to happen from one of these guys, from a Hamlin or from a Truex, to be able to get him. And then I just don't think, Gibbs is just not going to be one of my favorite plays this week. Although his odds, when you look at the odds, a little surprised. He's the fourth choice in the betting markets. But I just think the downside is just too great. I think he's strictly a GPP play, obviously. And I think the downside here is tremendous, where, with that first place starting position. So, and then I think Keselowski's a guy that a lot of people are going to like. He's got he's got a long history. He's won how many times I'm trying to bring up his history at this track, but he's got he's got a great history at the track. In the next gen cars, not so much. He's got 2 16th place finishes, but I mean, Keselowski at intermediate tracks is always a play. Starting 14th, he's going to be a factor, I believe, in this race. So I think 14. I don't know where the ownership was. They got him at about 35% on the ownership. I think he probably is lower than that on the ownership. And if he's in the 20s, I think Keselowski becomes a really strong play for how well he does at these tracks. And he's been much better as of late. I think Keselowski gets himself in the mix here, gets certainly contends for a top 5 position.
Yeah, he seems like one of the best values of the whole lot to me. I mean, starting 14th, so you get that little place differential you talked about. And honestly, I like in this section, I mean, I like all the like mid-rangers like Keselowski, Chastain, Buescher. I don't like Kyle Busch as we get into that. But before I go down though, Gibbs, I mean, to me, I always hate playing the guy in first, starting first, unless I just feel super confident in their car and their talent. Like when some of these guys up front, and I just feel like they're going to lead a lot, I don't see how you can play Gibbs. I mean, don't get me wrong. If you're playing 150, I totally get it. You can't really just full fade because when he leads a bunch, you're just going to get dusted. But if you're playing one team or 3 or even 20, man, I just think he's a terrible, terrible play starting first. I just don't see him going out in the ownership. Like if you told me he was 15%, then I think I could make a case for that because if he goes out, then you get ahead of the field a little bit. But if he's anywhere near the 30s, even 35%, say 30%, I just don't see it. And he's not that much cheaper. But my last question for the top guys, just because I'm curious myself. So usually you got like some place differential up top in the expensive. Basically 9K and up, you have all somewhat. I know we got a little PD with Bell, Larson, Elliott, but these guys got to lead some laps, right? I mean, what's your cutoff for that? I mean, do you put all these guys like where they need to at least lead some laps? Like if Gibbs leads no laps except for whatever, 10, 20 laps, and he finishes 4th, like is he in the winner?
Now I got to think what 4th place. So he gets obviously the -3. You got to figure out these guys up at the top are going to have to get, I think, 55 points minimum. So you got to figure out where that is. These guys at 9K up, I think that's what they're going to have to score, if not more than that for some of the guys at the higher end. So that's kind of how you have to figure it out. So yeah, you're probably going to have to get some laps led as well as a strong finish. Certainly from a Gibbs, I think he's going to have to lead. He's going to have to get you a bunch of laps led, and he's going to have to finish probably in the top 2 or 3. So that's why it's just not one of my favorite plays. I just don't. I don't see it. I think his ownership's probably going to be a little too high. Like again, in the 150, you're going to do it because you kind of have to. But yeah, if I'm making a single build, I'm going to kind of pass there. I think you're just better off taking a shot with one of those guys that we talked about earlier in that 10K range, where we were talking about like a Bell or a Byron. I didn't even mention with Byron. Byron led a bunch of laps here last year. So, he's got a ton of Dom points last year, and he was pretty good in qualifying at a low own. So, I mean, I would much rather take either Bell or Byron, I think, than Gibbs.
And you just get the luxury, too, of these guys that are cheaper as we go into this next range. Like you said, Keselowski, one of the best plays in my opinion. Like, I like Kes so much better than Gibbs. Similar reasons, honestly, of what you talked about at the top, where you like Larson over Hamlin, 12th, 4th. I mean, you're giving me Keselowski starting 14th when I think he's similar talent level to Gibbs too. Similar car. I mean, 200 cheaper and 13 different place differential spots. I just have to. I don't like Logano. I'm not going to play him in this spot. But Chastain and Buescher too, I put them in a similar thing as Keselowski where, I mean, Chastain and Buescher could win this race. They're talented enough to win it. You got good place differential. And then the last guy in this range, and I'll let you talk about it, but I just can't play Kyle Busch. He's going to be popular today. I just think he sucks anymore. And honestly, I'm just going to fade him every week. I hope he's popular. I think this is a good number right here too, honestly, because he pops in my value number on the cheat sheet over at Run Pure Sports for those of you that look at it. I just think he's going to be somewhat popular starting 24th. I just think he sucks. So I can't wait to hear hopefully he's not like in your core or something and I'm making fun of it. But I really like Kaz, Chastain, Busher, and I really don't like Kyle and Logano. What do you got in this range?
Yeah, I missed who you were you were referring to, and I'm like, oh, I hope he's not talking about Chastain because I do like Chastain. Yeah.
I was talking about Kyle.
Yeah. No, I caught it at the end. I was getting I was getting a message from JPC, and I'm like, and reading that at the same time. But yeah, no, I'll agree with you on Kyle Busch. I mean, he was great here historically, but he was great in a lot of places historically, and that was with Joe Gibbs, and he is not with he's not with Joe Gibbs anymore. So I'm not going to be high on him.
He feels like an absolute tank right now. Like every week I watch, like he seems horrible.
It's some of it's been luck. I think some of it is he's a guy who's obviously used to a lot of success. I think he's gotten frustrated in some of these races and caused a bit of his own problems as well. I saw something earlier today where he said they fixed something or other. I'm the furthest thing from a mechanic. But he was feeling pretty confident they fixed something with the steering. But
he'll break it again anyways, even if they fix
exactly. Yeah, I'm not high on Kyle Busch here. But the guy I do like, Logano's another one I would kind of I think you could toss out Logano. He won that race a couple of weeks ago in Nashville. Just another fluky type of race. He was the only guy who didn't run out of gas somehow and was able to win that race. He will not be a factor here starting 10th. I think Chastain's the guy. You mentioned it. I think Chastain has a chance to win this race, and I may pop him in the bets. I haven't figured out who I'm betting just because I like to take some value when I can, and I just I feel pretty. I don't feel all that great of going against some of these guys up at the top, but I do think there's a couple of spots, and I'll go into it deeper once we get off the podcast, but I do think Chastain's one of those guys that you have to look at to potentially win this race. And starting 19th, I think he's going to be much lower owned than he needs to be. I think if he gets up front, and I think he has a possibility of doing that, I think he can get us some lead laps as well from that starting position. So I do like Chastain quite a bit. And I think Buscher's a pretty good play for GPPs again. 18th starting spot. He's done well at Kansas, right? So Kansas is the track that we can correlate the most to Pocono, and he has decent history there. So I would keep Buscher certainly in play. And I think a couple of these guys, like I said, Buscher and Chastain are really, really interesting. With Busch and Logano, I'm kind of tossing out.
Yeah, I mean, if you got a team with like Kaz, Chastain, Buscher, and then maybe you go a little lower at the top, like and play a Reddick, like you thought. Maybe it's like a Reddick Byron where you fade all those top guys and go more mid tier. I think that's an interesting build today because I really, really like Kaz, Chastain, Buscher, and not many people are going to play all three of them together.
No.
I don't think, just because of that weird spot. They're all three in the teens. I think they're like great plays, but let's keep it moving down because we got baseball coming too. 7Ks. I mean, I can't really go to Bowman on FanDuel. I like Bowman a lot, but on DK can't go to him. You got Bubba, who everyone agrees is the best play of the day, which obviously, like last week, can go both ways. He's clearly the best play at 7,600, starting 29th. I mean, he's going to be owned like it though too, and that's what we come across in NASCAR. How much do you care about that ownership at times? And I usually just don't care. I usually just take a stand. I'm going to go heavy on Bubba, but I don't know. I'm not like locking anyone in NASCAR. So if he's 50%, I'll be a little ahead of the field, but it's not like I'm just full jamming him or something, just because anything can happen, as we've seen a million times. Suarez, I don't love. Gregson and Briscoe, though, I think are pretty good plays at this price range, 25th and 28th. Both pretty decent win odds. I like, especially Briscoe. If he's really 6% owned, I think he's a great play at 7,200, starting 28th. And then to finish out the 7Ks, I don't like Josh Berry or Eric Jones. I'll be off of them. But man, Briscoe 6%. That really catches my interest if that's even close to true.
Yeah, he's going to be a little bit more than that. He'll be in the teens, but his history here and at these larger tracks, not all that good. So I'm not going to get overly excited. At 6%, I agree with you. You'd probably want to get some pieces.
28th though, like he's back in there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've heard you're not the only one. I've heard some other people who are kind of interested on Briscoe, but I think if we don't know what the ownership's going to be, but I think it's going to be closer to 15% than it is to 5%. And I think at 15%, yeah, I'm not as excited there. Bubba Wallace is the guy, obviously, in this range. Everyone's going to be looking at. We talked about on the show. Because we had a big winner a few weeks ago. We've had big winners quite a bit, but Chef Franco, I don't know if he's watching it. I shout him out all the time because he kind of started me on picking, giving him someone to lock into his 20 man lineups. And I'm in NASCAR, I'm totally fine. As a matter of fact, more often than not, I'm going to lock in one of the chalkier plays. I'm going to just kind of take that spot away when it suits. And we've done pretty well with suggesting who that chalk play should be to lock in. I just think this week it's a no-brainer with Bubba. 7,600. Like I said, I think he's the one guy who was mispriced. He's got a really strong history at these type of tracks. Just too much place differential. I think if he stays clean, it's going to be really hard for him not to find his way into the nuts. So I think if you're going to lock anyone, if you're playing 3 maxes, 20 max, I think Bubba's the guy you have to do it with. Suarez, I just got no interest in. I don't think he's got a ton of upside here. Gragson is slow in practice. He was slow, so was Briscoe. Another reason that I'm kind of iffy on these guys. They were 2 of the slowest cars in all the field. So, I'm not as excited about Gragson. And then Berry, where he's starting 5th, I think he just has absolutely no value here. I think Eric Jones is interesting because he's had a ton of success on these type of tracks and at this place in particular. He's had great success here in the past. Again, though, super slow in practice, and I really think those practice times are going to be indicative of how these guys run here today. So I'm not as high, despite the really good track history from Jones here. So I'd be cautious with Jones as well.
Just two interesting lines too that I was looking as you were talking. I don't think Gragson and Briscoe will win probably, but just looking at odds, like they're like 80 to 100 to 1 everywhere. And somehow on MGM, they're both 200 to 1. Like, again, I'm not saying to like go crazy or something, but I know people like these long shot bets, like 200 to 1 for Gragson. That's just crazy to me. And again, I say it to clarify, like, I don't think they're going to win, but everything you in betting should be odds based. Like, if you think you got pretty good value at that number, it should, in theory, be a good bet. And I know you don't like them as much as me, but I think Gragson and Briscoe 200 to 1 and these price points.
Well,
I got a decent amount of interest in there.
I haven't looked at it close there, but if they have, usually that's going to correlate to, the top 5s and top 10s as well. And that may be a spot that you could get some value. You'd have to look at the other market, but if they're way off the market on those prices, you probably have a better shot. Well, obviously you do have a better shot at a top 10 than you do a win, and you still may be getting some pretty strong odds.
That's an excellent point. So you're saying, like, if I look at top 10s and stuff, it'll correlate all the way.
It should.
That's a good idea.
It should. That would be interesting if it didn't. If they were the same odds across, and matched up with other books, and they didn't. That would be interesting. But typically, you see it in guy look at the golf odds quite a bit. Top 5s, top 10s, 20s, and typically, if a guy's going to be, kind of off the market with one book on his win odds, it's going to kind of carry its way through the top 5s and 10s. So that could be something you want to take a look at.
I like that too, because like I said, I don't think they win, but you never know. Like with pit strategy, I know a lot of the chat's talking about it, but in races like this, it can come down to stuff. Maybe you just get lucky and something weird happens, but I like what you're saying even better. Top 10 at juiced odds is much better because I don't need 200 to 1 anyways in a bet. Like, obviously,
you can play for $5. You want to play for $5, play for $5 lottery ticket, but you could put a little bit more serious money maybe on a top 10.
Put an actual bet on top 10. Put a token bet on the 200 to 1, and maybe it hits there. And we had one question from the chat, and I know you've been using SaberSim more and more as we've been. Do you use ROI or RA ROI when you're sorting by the Sims in NASCAR, or neither?
Yeah, I mean, people are gonna hate my answer because it's always like it depends. So I have an idea of where my ownership's gonna be. Now, ROI and RAROI are gonna usually be fairly similar. I would say for most people, stick to the RAROI. It's probably gonna be a little bit better for you. But in all honesty, sometimes I use the cash one. Sometimes it really depends on what I'm looking for, and how the allocations are. So I tinker with it quite a bit. But I think if you're just straight using the Sims, the RAROI is probably going to be a little safer for you.
That's what I use for all of them. But like you with NASCAR and stuff, I like to run it with that and then kind of see where my numbers are. And then I'll run it just by projection and see where my numbers are. And then just keep moving. And then whatever one I feel like is more the direction I want to go is where I'll go. But in general, like baseball, I use RAROI all the time. Do you always use it in baseball or do you do different stuff?
Again, it wouldn't be always, but let's
Yeah.
just say enough of the time.
In
I do
general,
use,
just
yeah,
like
yeah.
normal, just a blanket slate. That's where you'd go first. Put it that way.
I always look there first, and it's going to depend. But yeah, let's
Yeah.
just say for the most part, I'm using RAROI.
All right, this next range gets somewhat interesting as we get into the cheaper guys. But McDowell's the one for me that I don't feel like I feel like I like way more than everyone else. 5% projected on Sabre. I think what was he on? He's only 40-1 on DraftKings to win it. I just feel I really like that 21 spot. I like Gilliland too. I hate Cendric. Stenhouse is the one for me. I always feel like I get wrong, but starting 31st, again, I feel like he's got to be higher owned than 8% because I hear everyone talking up Stenhouse. I think he again, you're going to know this better than me, but a new car or some sort of new equipment or something. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I thought I read that. But Hakovar, no. I'm not going to play Dinger. Haley, I think I'll have some of. Priest, I'll have some just because 34, 36. But I think you said it a little earlier. I don't have a ton of faith in these cheaper guys this week, which is why I like Gilliland a ton, starting 33rd. I know he's a little more expensive than the cheapies, and then McDowell is the cheap guy or the sneaky guy for me in this range. But what do you think in this range?
In this range, yeah, you started off with McDowell and Gillen. These are teammates, right? So McDowell ran super fast in practice. So I don't know if that's kind of weighing into why you may like him, and I think it should. I agree with you. I think he's probably going to be low on now. Of course, the starting, maybe the starting position of 21st. Well, it's not as good as we may get like from some of these other guys in this price range. But I do think McDowell in that fast car is an intriguing play. But I think the guy who's even more intriguing, the guy I like quite a bit, is his teammate at front row, which is Todd Gilliland. When these guys, we've seen it a lot with these guys. Like they'll have extremes. Gilliland was awful in practice, but I think that's by design. Not that he was awful, but I think they're looking for one of these guys to hopefully run well in practice, and then they could use that setup come race day. So I think Gilliland will be a lot better. He's going to have a similar setup to McDowell. So I think Gilliland becomes a real intriguing play that I think maybe is getting a bit overlooked. So I like him quite a bit, starting 33rd. He's my favorite guy in the back at 6,800. So that's really where I'm looking. The guys like some of these other guys, I don't have a ton of interest in. You mentioned Allmendinger. Don't necessarily love Hocevar starting way too high, 15th. Cindric, I don't remember what you said there on.
He never comes through for
some
me.
People
so
like,
I just hate Cindric.
I've heard some people, with Cindric don't really love it. I just don't love the range here. As I'm looking through these guys, Haley started.
Stenhouse is the one I want to hear from you because there's no way he's 8%. He's going to be
no, he's higher. Yeah, people are talking. They're talking Stenhouse up a little bit, and I'm going to have much more than that. He's got a good history at this track. Finished 7th here last year. He's been slow with the setup and the package that they've had this year, but he ran decently in practice. He was in the like 20th in practice, but for the price and where he's starting at 31st, I don't think he's the worst play in the world. I do think you're right. He's going to be much more owned than Saber is really making him out to be. I think we're looking at, a lot of people. The other thing with Stenhouse is a lot of people just don't like to play him. I mean, when your nickname is, Wreckhouse and all that, like people just get afraid and they get off of him. But I think 15% is pretty safe as to where he's going to be. And I don't mind taking a shot with Stenhouse just because of the track history has been pretty good. So if you want a piece, you're looking for someone cheap. I just think at 6,800, to me, Gilliland's my favorite guy down here, and I really like him quite a bit. We've had I put him in the core. I put him in my core plays, which is and I think I was shocked. I thought I was going to be sneaky. Someone else had it was either you or Rubio had him in their core, so I guess it wasn't you.
We'll give a freebie.
We'll give a free core out, man.
But all three of us have him in our core, actually.
Oh, we do? Okay. I knew I saw someone.
Yeah.
I thought that was crazy. I'm like, for a guy who's not going to be high.
I couldn't believe you both had him, too. Kind of like you just said. I thought he was going to be like one of my sneakier guys, and you both had him.
That's what's making me like, well, maybe he's just going to be higher owned than I thought. Because I was the third one to put it. I'm like, these guys are just going to think I'm copying them. But
we usually, the people that have followed us all year, we usually disagree a decent amount of NASCAR.
Yeah.
So if we ever all three have a play, like it's probably a decent play. I mean, we don't usually have that in NASCAR.
Not with a guy like that. Not with a guy who's not expected to be home. So he'll probably wreck early. That's probably what.
Good chance with all of us in there on him, and it's still Todd Gilliland. But this is the range I think you're going to win it, though.
Yeah,
I just sorted and got rid of some of the riffraff, but like you literally have Gilliland 68, Stenhouse 65, Haley 62, Priest 61, all starting in the 30s, and you need these cheap guys to be able to make the good stuff at the top work. So one of the reasons I liked McDowell is just that exact point. Like everyone's going to gravitate towards, especially Gilliland, Stenhouse, and Haley, I think will get more ownership than that too. So McDowell just feels like such a good leverage play. Maybe I'll end up using that for that segment at the end you were talking about, but I don't know. I like this range though. Can you play Priest? Because I think Priest is the least favorite of everybody.
He was real slow in practice. His entire team was slow. I don't have a lot of confidence. I like Haley much better starting 34th. I think Haley's got, some talent, and he could definitely work his way up into a high enough finish position where he qualifies as well. We could get, I think you kind of said it there. I mean, we could see a couple of guys from this range make it into the winning lineup.
And that was kind of what Saber was pushing when I did it earlier. You were finding 2 or 3 of these guys at the bottom just so you could play 3 studs at the top. And I honestly don't totally hate it. I mean, I like this range a lot. And just to polish up the rest of it, I mean, this bottom's where I don't like it much. I love LaJoy starting 30th, but the rest of this range down here, I don't see a ton. Does anything stick out for you in the bottom?
I think it's LaJoy, and I think Hemrick has to garner a little bit of attention as well. He's been pretty good in the intermediate package. I think he's probably a top 20 car. So I think starting where he's starting 27th, you've got to respect it at 5,400. So I think it's LaJoy and Hemrick down here. I don't particularly like like anyone else down at the bottom.
All righty. I mean, that separates it all. So what do we do here at the end? You know the segments. Let's keep
sort it by Rubio usually he sorts it by ownership, and we'll take someone under 20. I think we pretty much announced who we like though under the 20%.
We got a lot of guys under 20.
We do. So yeah, I mean, I think we both obviously like Gilliland here under the 20%. That seems like a no-brainer.
Somebody besides Gilliland. Gilliland's our show pick for sure.
Yeah, let's think of a guy here. I'm gonna look on mine and sort it. But let's see the next guy that I like. I'll give you a guy, and one of the guys that's starting up front who I think would be interesting, and that's Byron. I think Byron could be sneaky as well. So obviously we like Gilliland, but I think Byron would be my next guy here.
Yeah, and I agree because at the top's where you can kind of get some leverage, and I've learned this from you and JBC a ton in other sports, but one way you can get really different and win something is just getting different at the top. Christopher Bell, Byron, even Blaney. I hate Blaney. I'm not playing him. But guys like that at the top that are priced and lower owned are definitely how you can get some great leverage on the field. The problem in NASCAR, they're lower owned for a reason, and I've just had more success kind of sticking on some of that chalk in NASCAR, but the reasoning for it is definitely sound. I'm with you, though, on Byron. And for my lower, besides Gilliland, I mean, I like Corey LaJoie, too, a ton, and if he's only 9%, I think he's a great play at the bottom.
Yeah, I think it's I can't argue with that either. I think down in that 5K range, there's only a couple of guys I like, and I think LaJoie would be one of them.
What's you guys do winners too, I assume?
No, like what? Who do we like to win?
Yeah, some bets. Like I've seen you give out a winner at least 2 or 3 of the week.
Yeah,
bets here.
I'm still confused as far as the betting goes, but I'd say, with the odds, I mean, the guy who's going to, I think Larson wins the race. Big, like I'm really going out on a limb there, but I don't know if I necessarily like him at 5-1, the plus 500 or plus 600, depending where it's at. I'll have to dive into it more. Like I said, I think the long shot play was the guy that I mentioned earlier. I think you can take a shot on Chastain as a long shot at, you want a price plus 4,100.
45
I think is worth
DK right now. It looks
is he
like
45? Okay, yeah. So I think that's a kind of toss a bullet there, and even a Keselowski at 1,800 over on BetMGM might be worth a dabble.
Yeah, those things. I was trying to see who I talked about a few of the like bombers, but I'm with you. I think we agree on a lot today, which I don't know if
that's never good.
A good thing or a bad thing, but I mean Bubba at 50-1 on MGM too. Like,
yeah,
I know he's the best DFS play, but 50-1 on Bubba when we like him a lot. So I don't know. I think we agree on a lot. Our core plays, if you want to check them out too, over at Run Pure Sports, we got a cheat sheet up as we always do. Me, Rubio, JBC/stats. We have all of our stuff up. Tags for every single driver, value ratings, odds, projections, everything you could want for NASCAR. Core plays, obviously, from all three of us as well. Check it out over on the site. And this week, we're going to roll out a big promotion for the Open Championship. I know Stats and JBC are both going over to the event, but it's going to be a big week. There's going to be tons of giveaways. There's going to be a promo code for anyone that wants to check out the site. So obviously, I'm not telling you not to sign up today, but tomorrow there's going to be a nice promotion, and all week we're going to pump things this week. One more month basically till college football is getting ready to start. Preseason's here pretty soon. NFL right around the corner. Definitely check us out. I think we're doing great things, especially baseball-wise. I mean, Stats, DC, Bryce, these guys that are doing baseball stuff every single day. I have my player pull up every single day as well. It's been probably the best baseball season we've had, and I know JBC and Stats just continue to absolutely crush in baseball too. Check us out. Like I said, nice promo code tomorrow. Anything else, Stats, before we get out of here?
No, let's take something down here today. Let's do it.
I think whenever I come on the NASCAR show, it just means good mojo. So I think our core plays, we got 2 together just for the people because I like them and I don't come on often. Bubba and Gilliland, that's a good starting point for anybody's team. 7,600, 6,800. All 3 of us have them core tagged. Play 4, whatever. You can even get 2 or 3 studs with that build to start things out. So I think we're on the right track today. I think we're going to get it done, and we're going to move into baseball right now. So check out all the stuff on the site. Fun week coming. Stats, have fun over at the Open. I'm sure you will. Try to keep JBC alive over there, although I do think he's living a little better these last months with some stuff. But good stuff today. Good luck, everyone. Thanks for hanging out with us, and we will see you next time.